I didn't want to do it at first, and they'd been after me to do one for about 2 years. And I thought, well, as it turned out, we played all old songs, and they just sort of stared at us. And it was a strange experience, really. It was about, it was about 6 months ago.
Ricky Nelson was more than just a teen idol. He was a music legend whose charm and talent defined an era. To the world, he seemed like the boy next door, loved by fans and admired by his peers. But behind the spotlight, Ricky harbored deep frustrations with certain Hollywood stars. He was known for being private, rarely airing his grievances in public, which only added to his mysterious aura. However, after his shocking and tragic death in a 1985 plane crash, hidden truths began to surface. Friends and insiders started to reveal what Ricky had kept quiet for years, the 5 stars he truly couldn't stand. Now, decades later, we finally uncover the names of those celebrities and the real reasons why Ricky Nelson hated them. But before we begin, if you're a fan of Ricky Nelson, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Ricky Nelson entered the world on May 8, 1940, in Teaneck, New Jersey. But he was far from an ordinary child. His father, Ozzie Nelson, was a prominent bandleader, and his mother, Harriet Hilliard, was already making waves as an actress. From the moment he was born, Ricky's life unfolded under the gaze of the public. Even before he could walk, his family's radio program, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, had already captured the hearts of audiences nationwide. While most kids grew up in quiet neighborhoods, Ricky's childhood was spent under studio lights and in front of microphones. Family dinners often turned into rehearsals, and vacations frequently became storylines. Every moment, even the simplest ones, felt like part of a script. At just 8 years old in 1949, Ricky joined the family's radio show alongside his older brother, David. While his peers were busy trading baseball cards or riding bikes, Ricky was learning lines and collecting paychecks. His natural charm and effortless delivery made him a star before he even reached his teens. But fame had a cost. There were no schoolyard games, no birthday parties with classmates, only cameras, scripts, and the constant demands of the spotlight. His playground became the soundstage, and his childhood quietly slipped away in service of the family brand. In 1941, the Nelsons moved to Los Angeles, settling into a picturesque Cape Cod-style house at 1822 Camino Palmero. To the outside world, it looked like the perfect family home. So perfect, in fact, that it became an iconic backdrop on television, drawing fans who would drive by just to see it. But inside those walls, it was more workplace than sanctuary. Scripts were written at the dining table, rehearsals filled the living room, and Ozzie ran it all with precision. For Ricky, the lines between his real life and his on-screen persona blurred until they were nearly indistinguishable. Compounding it all was his struggle with asthma, which plagued him from an early age. It wasn't just an occasional inconvenience, it often kept him isolated, confined indoors while other kids played outside. Simple things like walking across a room could leave him breathless. Those long, lonely days shaped him into a quiet, observant child, one who often watched more than he spoke. This reserved nature later became part of his on-screen allure, but beneath it was a boy longing for normalcy, weighed down by illness and responsibility. When the radio show first began in 1944, actors played the roles of Ricky and David, but the brothers hated it. They wanted to be themselves. Eventually, they convinced their parents to let them join the cast, and from that point on, their real lives and scripted ones merged completely. Ricky Nelson was no longer just a boy. He was a symbol of an ideal American family, even if it meant sacrificing his own chance at an ordinary childhood. Ricky Nelson's life off-screen was far more complicated than his clean-cut image suggested. Behind the scenes, he found himself tangled in intense romances that would have stunned his adoring fans. One of the most talked about was with Marianne Gaba, who had played his on-screen sweetheart. Away from the cameras, their chemistry turned real, and Ricky would later confess that they spent hours in passionate embraces, a shocking revelation for the conservative 1950s. He even gifted her a gold ring engraved with "Marianne Love Rick," which she believed symbolized commitment. But while Marianne dreamed of a future together, Ricky had already started drifting toward others, including singer Lori Collins, with whom he shared not just music but fleeting youthful affection. To the public, he remained the wholesome boy next door, but privately, Ricky was speeding down the fast lane of teenage rebellion, and very few knew the truth. His parents, Ozzie and Harriet, who were more than just loving parents, they were also his managers and gatekeepers, watched it all with growing unease. They worried that romance would distract him from his skyrocketing career. Ozzy, in particular, was unrelenting in his control. Even though Ricky was earning $500 a week while still in his teens, his father strictly rationed his allowance, determined not to let fame spoil him. That control stretched beyond finances. Rumors of engagements were quickly shut down, and any serious relationships were forbidden. But Ricky, already used to the glare of fame and the pressures it brought, began to push back: secret girlfriends, late-night parties. He was still America's favorite TV son on screen, but behind closed doors, he was quietly slipping from his parents' grasp. By the time he was just 17, Ricky's debut album, simply titled Ricky, had soared to the top of the charts in October 1957, making him the youngest artist ever to hold that spot. But his rise wasn't just about catchy songs. It was the perfect fusion of television and music. Already a household name thanks to the adventures of Ozzy and Harriet, Ricky had the kind of visibility other young stars could only dream of. While Elvis ruled the radio, Ricky dominated both TV screens and record players. His singles, Bebop Baby, and Have I Told You Lately That I Love You, were hits even before the album dropped. It wasn't luck, it was a carefully crafted system built by Ozzy himself. As producer of their family's TV show, Ozzy had a brilliant idea: weave Ricky's music into the episodes. Each week, millions tuned in, and at the end of the show, Ricky would debut a new song. The strategy was genius. When he performed I'm Walkin' on TV in 1957, it shot to number 4 on the charts, and its B-side climbed even higher to number 2. The impact was staggering. Ozzy tightly controlled Ricky's appearances, even refusing invitations to major shows like Ed Sullivan, determined to keep all the attention within their own spotlight. Then came the turning point, Poor Little Fool. In August 1958, it became the very first song to ever reach number 1 on Billboard's newly created Hot 100 chart. Ironically, Ricky hadn't even wanted to record it. Written by a 15-year-old girl named Sharon Shealy, the track was never meant to be a single. But when radio stations couldn't stop playing it, the label released it, and it soared to the top, staying there for 2 weeks and crossing into country and R&B charts. That song etched Ricky's name permanently into music history. No one else could ever be first on the Hot 100. That title would always belong to him. Between 1957 and 1962, Ricky scored 20 top 40 hits, second only to Elvis during that era. His debut single, Bebop Baby, sold over 1 million copies, with pre-orders alone reaching $750,000. His record deal was unheard of for a teenager. $50,000 guaranteed over 5 years, plus creative control over his music and album art. As his fame exploded, so did his reach. By 1960, his international fan club boasted 9,000 chapters worldwide. Yet, beneath all the screaming fans and glittering success, Ricky was still just a boy navigating fame, pressure, and parental control. His story was not only about triumph but also the cost of growing up under a relentless spotlight, a reminder that behind every golden smile of a teen idol was a young man yearning for freedom in a world that never truly let him be one. The 5 stars he truly couldn't stand. Number 1. Elvis Presley. From the start of his career, Ricky was constantly compared to Elvis Presley. Both were young, handsome, and skyrocketed to fame as rock and roll took over America. But while Elvis ruled the stage with his raw charisma, Ricky felt trapped by his wholesome image. According to those close to him, Elvis himself didn't help matters. On one occasion, Presley reportedly joked that Ricky was Ozzy and Harriet's boy pretending to be a rock star. That remark cut deeply. The press fueled the rivalry, calling Ricky the TV Elvis, which he hated. He wanted to be recognized for his music, not as someone else's shadow. Their paths rarely crossed socially, but the tension was obvious when they did meet. Ricky respected Elvis's talent, said one former bandmate, but he hated how the industry constantly treated him like he was second best. This simmering resentment drove Ricky to take bold steps musically, carving out his own country rock sound to prove he was more than a teen idol or Presley's imitator. Number 2. Roy Orbison. Ricky and Roy Orbison toured together in the early 1960s, but their relationship quickly soured. Orbison, known for his soaring voice and perfectionism, often criticized Ricky's setlists, once telling him backstage to stick to the safe hits. Nelson, who was eager to experiment and grow beyond his image, was furious. A crew member who traveled with them recalled a heated exchange. Ricky told Roy, "I don't need to be told what to sing. and Roy shot back, "Then stop trying to impress people who only want the old stuff." It was icy from that point on. For Ricky, Orbison symbolized everything he disliked about the industry. The idea that he had to stay boxed into teen idol songs forever. This feud only strengthened his resolve to break free and explore a grittier, more mature sound that eventually defined his later career. Number 3. Randy Meisner. Among all his disputes, Ricky's falling out with Randy Meisner hit the hardest. Meisner joined Ricky's Stone Canyon Band in the late 1960s, and for a time, they worked well together. But insiders say Meisner left abruptly, taking Ricky's musical contacts and some of his arrangements, eventually co-founding the Eagles. Nelson reportedly felt blindsided and betrayed. Randy used Ricky's platform to build his career, then walked away without a backward glance, said a former road manager. Ricky even banned talk of Meisner during rehearsals, refusing to discuss him publicly. Privately, though, friends say the wound ran deep. It wasn't just about losing a bassist, it was about losing someone Ricky had trusted, only to see him soar to superstardom while Ricky's own career struggled. Number 4. Bo Diddley. One of Ricky's most infamous clashes came in the mid-1960s during a music festival where he and Bo Diddley shared the bill. While their sets were well received, tensions exploded backstage. Witnesses recall Bo accusing Ricky of selling out rock and roll for TV, mocking his wholesome image and claiming he softened the music for the suburban crowd. Ricky didn't hold back. He fired back that Bo was stuck in the past and that rock music needed to evolve. Crew members stepped in to cool tempers, but the damage was done. Ricky hated being called fake, said one insider. That was the one thing that really got under his skin, and Bo pushed that button. From that day on, Ricky avoided working anywhere near Bo Diddley, telling associates he didn't need that kind of energy around. Number 5. Gene Pitney. Ricky's relationship with Gene Pitney was less explosive but equally bitter. Both were chart-topping stars in the early 60s, but Pitney's cocky attitude rubbed Ricky the wrong way. Pitney often bragged about outselling Ricky, once dismissing him in an interview as yesterday's news. That remark infuriated Ricky. Friends say he never forgave Pitney for the insult, viewing it as blatant disrespect for a fellow artist. Ricky wasn't confrontational by nature, one close friend revealed. But with Pitney, he seethed quietly. He hated arrogance more than anything, and Gene had plenty of it. Despite these grudges, Ricky Nelson never aired his complaints in public. He wasn't the type to stir up drama for the press or feed gossip columns. But privately, these clashes shaped him. They fueled his determination to reinvent himself musically and prove he wasn't just a pretty face from a sitcom family. Ricky's later work, especially songs like Garden Party, born out of his frustration with being pigeonholed, showed a man who had fought hard for his identity in an industry that wanted to keep him boxed in. In the end, Ricky Nelson's rivalries weren't about petty jealousy. They were about respect. He demanded it for himself, his music, and his craft, and those who denied him that respect landed squarely on his list of stars he could never stand. In 1972, Rick poured his heart into a song called Garden Party. It wasn't just music, it was his story stripped bare. The chorus carried a message that felt like a personal revelation. You can't please everyone, so you've got to please yourself. That line struck deep with fans everywhere. The track soared to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and even went gold, marking Rick's first top 10 hit in nearly a decade. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like he was back on top. Listeners who had long forgotten him were suddenly singing his words. But the comeback didn't stick. Follow-up singles like Palace Guard fizzled out, and albums such as Windfall failed to catch on. By 1974, his record label seemed lost on how to handle him. Soon, Rick was performing at small venues, amusement parks, and accepting minor television roles. Eventually, MCA dropped him. Garden Party became both a triumph and a bittersweet goodbye to the stardom he once knew. By the mid-1970s, Rick Nelson, once the bright face of American pop, was watching his world unravel. His marriage to Chris was hanging by a thread, maintained only for appearances to support their expensive lifestyle, private schools, lavish homes, and endless bills. Rick toured relentlessly, but the more he worked, the further apart they drifted. Chris felt abandoned, Rick felt suffocated. Their home became a war zone. In 1977, after another exhausting tour, Rick returned home hoping for comfort but was instead met with heartbreak. He found himself locked out. Chris had moved his belongings to a rental house, and when he arrived, she was there, flanked by 2 Los Angeles Rams cheerleaders. Humiliated and stunned, Rick realized there was no saving their marriage. Chris accused him of drug use, claiming it endangered their children, while Rick's team denied it all. But their relationship was shattered beyond repair. They made one last attempt in 1980. Rick spent $750,000 on Errol Flynn's former mansion on Mulholland Drive, hoping it could be a new beginning. Instead, it only deepened the cracks. Chris wanted him to abandon music and focus on acting, but Rick couldn't walk away from touring. He was drowning in debt. The mansion, meant to be a sanctuary, became a source of dread. Strange noises, flickering lights, whispers of it being haunted, it all added to the tension. Their financial troubles grew worse, and the dream home turned into a nightmare. The divorce battle that followed was vicious. Chris accused Rick of substance abuse and claimed their children's lives were in danger if she stayed. Rick fired back, alleging she drank heavily and left their kids to be raised by hired help. The courtroom drama dragged on for 5 long years, draining over $1 million in legal fees and leaving deep emotional scars. Their children, caught helplessly in the crossfire, watched their family fall apart piece by piece. By the end of 1982, the divorce was finalized. Rick was ordered to pay $4,000 a month in child support and granted joint custody of his 4 children, who were between the ages of 8 and 19. But victory felt hollow. The legal war had left him nearly penniless. He pushed himself night after night on the road, touring endlessly just to keep up with the payments. The joy he once had was gone. His health declined, his spirit faded, and the man who once lit up stages now seemed burdened by a shadow he could never quite escape. By 1985, Rick Nelson was clinging to the hope of reviving his career. But one fear haunted him: flying. He despised it, yet he refused to endure the long hours of travel by bus. Determined to find a solution, he bought a 1944 Douglas DC-3 for $118,000, a plane that once belonged to rock legend Jerry Lee Lewis. To Rick, it seemed like the perfect way to save money and maintain privacy. But in reality, it was a disaster waiting to happen. The engines were notoriously unreliable. Parts broke down constantly, and on more than one occasion, the band had to push the plane off the runway. Everyone around him feared that plane. Guitarist Bobby Neal's wife pleaded with him not to board it. Bassist Patrick Woodward had already lived through 2 terrifying emergency landings. Pianist Andy Chapin wanted nothing to do with it either. But Rick, weighed down by financial pressures and an unrelenting schedule, ignored their pleas. Canceling shows wasn't an option. He needed the work. That September, when an engine failure forced him to miss a major performance in Fargo, it was clear just how dangerous things had become. Then came December 31, 1985. The plane had been delayed for hours due to yet another mechanical fault, but Rick boarded anyway. He and his band were headed to Dallas for a New Year's Eve show. Mid-flight, smoke suddenly filled the cabin so thick the pilots could barely see. In a desperate move, pilot Brad Rank had to fly blind, sticking his head out the side window. At 5:14 p.m., disaster struck. Witnesses saw the plane trailing black smoke, flying unsteadily before clipping trees near a small landing strip in Texas and erupting into flames. The wreckage was strewn across 150 yards. Only the pilots managed to escape through cockpit windows. Everyone else, Rick, his fiancée Helen Blair, pianist Andy Chapin, drummer Rick Intveld, guitarist Bobby Neal, bassist Patrick Woodward, and sound technician Donald Clark Russell, perished in the inferno. Rick Nelson was just 45 years old. The crash was so violent that autopsies were required to identify the remains. The world was left stunned. Rick Nelson, once one of the brightest teen idols of his era, was gone in an instant, just hours before the dawn of 1986. His death was not only tragic, it marked the heartbreaking end of a life and career that had touched millions. Even now, his loss feels like a painful reminder of how fleeting fame and life itself can be.